The rhythmic squeak of the mop echoed down the polished corridor of the Navy SEAL training compound. The scent of disinfectant hung heavy in the air, mingling with gun oil, sweat, and adrenaline, the perfume of warriors in training. Every hallway in this facility carried the ghosts of missions past, victories and tragedies that the outside world would never hear about. And through those same halls moved a quiet woman with a mop bucket and a name tag that simply read, M. Collins. Most of the soldiers barely noticed her. She was the janitor, invisible background noise in their world of steel and precision. To them, she was just another civilian contractor, an aging woman who cleaned their messes while they trained for glory. But if they had looked a little closer, they might have seen it. The way her posture never slouched, how her eyes scanned corners automatically, or how her footsteps were too silent, too deliberate. Those instincts weren't learned by cleaning floors. They were forged in the field. Maya Collins had learned to live unseen. It was safer that way. She moved with methodical patience, cleaning up after a group of trainees who had just left the shooting range. The laughter of young men still echoed faintly, old, confident, and untamed. They bragged about their marksmanship, their kills on virtual simulations, and the women waiting for them back home. Their voices faded as they exited the building, leaving Maya alone under the harsh fluorescent lights. She set down the mop, her gaze drifting toward the targets at the far end of the range. Paper silhouettes riddled with holes, most clustered around the center, a few stray marks toward the edge. Not bad, she thought, but not perfect. Her fingers twitched with a memory she couldn't suppress. How long had it been since she'd held a rifle? 2 years? 3? Her hands still remembered the weight, the cold precision of the weapon, the steady breath before the trigger broke. She turned away quickly. Memories were dangerous. They made her slip. Just then, the sound of footsteps broke her train of thought. 2 young recruits entered, laughing. They were maybe 20, cocky and full of themselves. One of them glanced at her mop and smirked. "Hey, you missed a spot, ma'am," he joked. Maya smiled politely. "Then I guess you'll be stepping in it soon." The other chuckled. "You've got some attitude. You ever fire one of these?" He motioned toward the rifle bench. "Once or twice," she replied, her tone even. The first laughed. "Yeah, sure. Maybe a Nerf gun?" Maya just kept mopping. There was no point explaining. She'd learned long ago that some people only understood proof delivered at 3,000 feet per second. The recruits eventually wandered off, leaving her in silence again. The sound of the mop swishing across the floor filled the empty range, hypnotic and steady. But her mind wasn't on cleaning anymore. It drifted backward, to deserts lit by gunfire, to sandstorms swallowing the sky, to the faces of comrades she'd lost. She could almost smell the cordite, hear the roar of helicopters above. Then, like a switch flipping off, she forced herself back to the present. The Navy had erased her from the records years ago, after what they called an incident. A political operation gone wrong. She'd taken the fall for a superior officer's failure. Instead of medals, she got silence. Instead of command, she got a mop. She preferred it that way, until that night. Maya finished her shift later than usual. The base was quiet, except for the distant hum of generators and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. On her way out, she paused near the open door of the mess hall. Inside, a handful of officers were still talking, voices sharp with authority and whiskey. She recognized a few faces, trainers, tacticians, egos in uniform. And one voice stood out, deep, commanding, arrogant. "Men are born for war," it said. That's the truth of it. You can dress up equality however you want, but when the shooting starts, only men stand tall. The others laughed. Maya knew that voice even before she turned to look. General Rourke. He was visiting from the Pentagon, evaluating the base for funding. A legend in his own right, decorated, influential, and dangerously old-fashioned. He'd served long enough to believe the battlefield was no place for women, no matter how capable they were. Maya listened from the doorway as he continued. "They've got female snipers now," he scoffed, "but I've yet to see one shoot that clean. The day a woman matches a man's precision, I'll eat my damn hat." More laughter. Glasses clinked. Maya quietly stepped back into the hallway, her face unreadable. She'd heard men like Rourke her entire career, loud, certain, and terrified of being proven wrong. She didn't feel anger anymore, just a cold, familiar calm, the kind that came before pulling a trigger. The next morning, the base buzzed with news of the general's visit. Trainees were told to prepare for inspection. Every hallway gleamed, every rifle was spotless. Maya kept cleaning, blending into the movement like a shadow. Around mid-morning, as she scrubbed near the training yard, a young soldier whispered to another, "That janitor creeps me out, man. She moves like she's watching us." "She's probably bored," the other replied. "Or crazy." Neither of them realized she could hear every word. Later, when she entered the range building again, she noticed something different. The targets had been changed, fresh sheets untouched. On the table lay an M110 sniper rifle, cleaned and ready. It gleamed in the light, and for a moment, Maya's heart stuttered. She knew that weapon like an old friend. Her fingerprints might still be etched on one somewhere overseas. She hesitated, then reached out, brushing her fingers along the barrel. It felt right, too right. But she quickly set it down as the door opened behind her. "Admiring the tools, Janitor?" It was one of the trainers, grinning. He didn't mean harm, just teasing. But before Maya could respond, a deeper voice boomed from the doorway. "Better keep the toys out of her reach. Wouldn't want her hurting herself," General Rourke said, stepping in with a smirk. A few officers laughed. Maya straightened, meeting his gaze briefly. "Understood, sir," she said evenly, then went back to cleaning the floor. Her restraint seemed to amuse him. "Good attitude," Rourke added. "Stay in your lane, and no one gets hurt." He walked off with the others, still chuckling. As the door closed behind them, Maya's mop stopped moving. The silence in the room grew heavy, thick with unspoken things. She looked at the rifle again, then at the targets. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She took a deep breath. That moment, something inside her shifted. The quiet part of her mind that had stayed asleep for too long was awake again. That night, she returned after hours. The range was empty, the lights dimmed. She set her mop aside, walked to the rifle bench, and picked up the M110. The weapon felt like it belonged in her hands, the weight perfectly balanced. She adjusted the scope, lay flat on the mat, and took aim at the farthest target. Her breathing slowed. Her heartbeat cinched with the rhythm she'd learned years ago. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The world shrank until there was only her, the rifle, and the target. Breathe, focus, fire. The bullet punched through the exact center of the target. She smiled faintly, stood up, and reloaded. One more. A second shot split the first bullet clean in half. For a long time, she just stood there, staring downrange. No applause, no orders, no medals. Just silence. Perfect, absolute silence. She put the rifle back, picked up her mop, and finished cleaning the floor as if nothing had happened. Outside, the wind rustled against the flagpole. The stars shimmered above the base, cold, distant, and unblinking. Tomorrow would come, and the general would keep talking. But soon, very soon, his words would turn to dust. Because when arrogance met precision, only one walked away clean. The first sign that the day would not be ordinary was the roar of the helicopters. They sliced through the early morning fog like hunting birds, their blades chopping the silence over the sprawling Navy SEAL base. Soldiers paused mid-drill, eyes snapping upward as the machine descended near the Central Command building. The landing pad was slick with dew, reflecting the dark metal of the aircraft, the promise of authority descending upon them. General Rourke stepped out, his boots striking the concrete with authority, each step a drumbeat of intimidation. He was a man who demanded obedience before understanding, a veteran of decades whose world had been built on hierarchy, rigor, and the unshakable belief that power was inherently male. Every wrinkle on his face was earned in blood and fire, every scar a chapter in a story of battlefield conquest. And yet, arrogance laced every line. He believed himself untouchable, untouchable by logic, untouchable by anyone, especially a woman. Maya Collins was cleaning the hallway near the target range when the entourage of officers and aides appeared, their polished shoes clicking on the tile like a warning. She recognized the general immediately from the picture she had seen years ago during her own tenure. Harsh eyes, cold smile, and a certainty that strength was measured by how loudly one could shout commands. "Morning, Janitor," Rourke barked without looking directly at her, his voice carrying across the hallway. The tone was a mixture of mockery and assumption. "We wouldn't want you to think you're part of this exercise, now would we?" The young officers accompanying him laughed, and the soldiers nearby shifted uneasily. Some tried to hide smiles. Others simply averted their gaze. No one dared contradict the general, not today, not ever. Maya tilted her head slightly, nodding politely, pretending she hadn't heard him. That had always been her strategy, invisibility as a shield. Her hands continued their ritual of cleaning, scrubbing at a scuff on the floor that would not be noticed until tomorrow. But beneath the surface, her mind raced. She remembered men like Rourke from her past. She remembered pride and prejudice, arrogance and dismissal. She remembered the sting of having her skills questioned simply because of her gender. And somewhere deep inside, a spark flickered, quiet, steady, and dangerous. The general's entourage moved toward the range. Rourke's voice carried like rolling thunder over the firing line as he addressed the gathered soldiers. "I've seen your drills. I've seen your claims of precision," he said, his eyes sweeping the young man in the yard like a predator. "But there's a difference between confidence and reality. Only men, trained and hardened, can shoot clean. Only those who understand fire, wind, and heart can hit the target every time. Women? Cute in theory, ineffective in practice. This is the truth. Accept it or fail." Laughter rippled among the officers, some nervous, some eager to please. The trainees shifted uncomfortably. A few glanced toward Maya, whose mop leaned against the wall as if expecting the impossible. She did not move. She did not react. Her eyes, however, flicked to the rifle rack at the side of the range. M110 sniper rifles, meticulously maintained, gleamed like dormant predators. Her fingers ached for the cold steel, the familiar heft. She knew the weight of one in her hands, as well as she knew the weight of her own heart. The general continued, unaware of the storm gathering quietly in the corner. "You've been told your limits, and I am here to ensure you understand them. Only men can shoot with precision. And if anyone doubts me, well..." His smirk widened, a predator enjoying his prey. "Let's see who's really capable." The demonstration began. The soldiers lined up, rifles in hand, eyes tight with concentration. They fired at a series of targets at increasing distances. First 50 meters, then 100, then 200. Each shot was a testament to their training. Each hit drew nods of approval from Rourke. Maya watched silently, crouched near her mop as the young soldiers, some trembling under the pressure, attempted to match the general's standards. Many were skilled, some exceptional, but none were perfect. One trainee's hand shook so badly he missed the target entirely, drawing a sharp bark of reprimand from a lieutenant standing nearby. Rourke's grin remained smug. "See?" he said. "This is what separates men from wannabes. Precision is born in adversity, honed in battle, and maintained only by those willing to bleed for it." Maya's fingers tightened around her mop. Her mind ran scenarios faster than any simulation. Wind speed, humidity, bullet trajectory. She calculated angles, distances, and velocity. Her breath slowed, her heartbeat steady. The body memory that had been dormant for years awakened, demanding attention. A young recruit, braver or perhaps more foolish than most, nudged her. "You think you could do better?" he whispered, smirking. Maya's lips twitched into a faint, unreadable smile. She shook her head slightly and returned to her cleaning. Silence was her ally. Showing her skill now would be unnecessary. The right moment would demand it. Then Rourke's words cut through the air again. "And remember," he said, turning toward the soldiers, "only men can shoot that clean. Women, you may as well keep mopping. Real precision doesn't forgive weakness." A few soldiers laughed nervously, exchanging awkward glances. Some tried to mask unease behind forced smiles. But Maya's eyes narrowed. The words weren't just arrogant, they were a challenge. A gauntlet thrown at her feet. It had been years since anyone doubted her skills. Yet here it was, the same bias, the same underestimation she had encountered countless times in missions that mattered. She had been underestimated overseas, in deserts, jungles, and hostage operations, where a single missed shot meant death. And yet, here she was, a janitor in their eyes, waiting silently while egos strutted like peacocks on the range. The crowd's attention returned to Rourke as he raised a hand. "All right, soldiers, prepare for the final test." He motioned to the rifle bench. "Targets at 300 meters. Only one shot each. Prove your worth." The soldiers raised their rifles, hands trembling under the general's gaze. One by one they fired, many missing by centimeters, some by inches. The general barked orders, criticism slicing the air. His words were sharp, designed to humiliate, to test not just skill, but composure under pressure. Maya, still cleaning near the side, paused. She didn't move toward the rifles. She didn't speak. She simply waited. The room buzzed with tension. Then, almost as an afterthought, one of the younger soldiers chuckled and said, "Maybe the janitor should try." The room erupted in laughter. A few officers smirked, Rourke included. He pointed at Maya. "Yes, that's right. The janitor. I dare you. Only men can shoot that clean, remember?" Maya's eyes lifted, calm, steady, deadly in silence. She walked toward the rifle bench. Each step was deliberate, controlled, silent. The laughter faded as her presence claimed the room. She picked up an M110 sniper rifle, checking the scope, the wind, the distance. Rourke's smirk faltered. The room went quiet. Soldiers watched, some with disbelief, some with anticipation. The general leaned forward, arrogance twisting into unease. Maya took her stance, laid flat on the range mat, and breathed. Inhale. Exhale. Time slowed. Years of training, missions, and unacknowledged talent converged into this single, silent moment. She aimed. And then she fired. The bullet struck the center of the distant target. Dead center. Perfect. Gasps rippled through the room. Soldiers froze. Rourke's eyes widened. His mouth opened, closed, then remained agape. Maya reloaded and fired a second shot, splitting the first bullet clean in half. Silence, absolute, heavy silence. She placed the rifle down carefully. Calm, controlled, unassuming. "You were wrong," she said softly, without raising her voice, without needing to. Precision doesn't require permission. The words hung in the air, like smoke from a spent shell. No applause. No cheering. Just the stunned realization that the janitor, the woman Rourke had mocked, had just shattered every assumption in the room. Rourke's face was unreadable, a storm of fury and disbelief brewing behind his eyes. Soldiers whispered among themselves, the young recruit who had mocked her earlier now silent, eyes wide. Maya returned to her mop, finishing her task as if nothing had happened. The lesson had been delivered. The arrogance exposed. The silence was deafening. And outside, the morning sun rose over the base, indifferent to the drama within, illuminating the long shadow of a janitor who had just reminded everyone what real skill looked like. The echo of the gunshots lingered long after the rifle was put down. The room remained silent, except for the low hum of the fluorescent lights. Soldiers glanced at one another in disbelief. Whispers began, tentative, cautious, like ripples in a pond. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary, yet no one fully understood it. Lieutenant Harris, a young and sharp-eyed officer, was the first to break the stunned silence. He approached Maya cautiously, keeping his voice low. "I know who you are," he said, eyes darting around to ensure no one overheard. "A name in the archives. It's you, isn't it?" Maya froze for a fraction of a second. Her mop paused mid-air. Her expression didn't betray her thoughts. "What do you mean?" she asked calmly, though the corner of her eye betrayed recognition. Harris leaned closer. "Lieutenant Commander Maya Collins, Navy SEAL, covert missions overseas. Your file. Sealed. Everyone thought you were discharged quietly. But those shots..." He hesitated. There's no way someone without experience could do that. Maya exhaled slowly, letting the silence stretch. It had been years since anyone had dared mention her past. The Navy had buried her accomplishments, erased her from records, and allowed rumors to swirl of incompetence. She'd learned early on that power respected only what could be proven in the moment, and nothing else. "Some things are better left in the past," she said softly. "Some truths don't need telling unless the world demands them." Harris nodded, a mixture of awe and confusion in his eyes. "Do you realize what you just did?" "Everyone, the entire base." "The general." His voice trailed. Maya didn't answer. She returned to the mop, scrubbing as if the prior minutes had been nothing more than a dream. But the young lieutenant was persistent. He continued, leaning against the wall. "They're going to want answers. People are already talking. Some soldiers saw the shots. Others saw your control, your breathing, the split shot. I've never seen anything like it. You're legendary." Maya's gaze lingered on the far wall of the range where the bullets had landed. Her mind drifted back to the days when she was a legend, before the betrayal, before the discharge, before anonymity became her shield. Years ago, she had been one of the first women to qualify for the Navy SEAL teams. She had fought in jungles, deserts, and urban battlefields where every mission was a test of nerve, skill, and resilience. She had led squads on covert operations, rescuing hostages, defusing explosives, and eliminating high-value targets. The medals, the commendations, the accolades, they had all meant something once. But then came the mission that changed everything. A political maneuver, a betrayal by her commanding officer, and the entire operation was rewritten in the logs. Orders were erased, failures pinned on her. She had returned home, dishonored, unrecognized, and effectively erased from the record. The Navy could no longer call her a SEAL. The world would not know her name. Maya had chosen silence after that. She left behind medals, uniforms, even the rifle she loved more than any person. She became a janitor at the very base where she once trained, hidden in plain sight. It was ironic. She had been tasked with cleaning the mess created by others, while being denied acknowledgement for cleaning chaos in the world itself. Harris listened intently as she spoke softly. He understood why the base had underestimated her. Few knew the truth of the battles fought behind closed doors. Few understood the weight carried by a woman who had survived missions that even the bravest men feared. "You can't hide forever," Harris said finally. "People are going to find out what you just did. It proves everything they tried to erase." Maya's eyes hardened, not with anger, but with clarity. "Proof," she said quietly, "is all some people need." Meanwhile, across the base, news of the incident began to spread like wildfire. Soldiers in barracks whispered about what they had seen. Recruits crowded into break rooms, talking over meals, replaying what they remembered in their heads. Even the administrative staff, who rarely ventured into the firing range, were buzzing. She's the janitor?" One trainee murmured. "I swear I saw it," another replied. "Split the first bullet in half. Perfectly." The story gained momentum as video footage, captured discreetly on a trainee's phone, began to circulate. Social media within the military networks lit up with disbelief, admiration, and awe. A janitor, a woman, no less, had just humiliated one of the most decorated generals in the United States military. At the center of this storm, Maya remained calm. She continued her work quietly, methodically, finishing her rounds of cleaning, polishing surfaces, ensuring no trace of activity remained that would betray her presence. Her calmness was a skill, honed over years of missions where exposure meant death. That afternoon, she found herself alone in the hallway once again. Harris approached, hesitating slightly. "Do you plan to respond to him?" "The general? He's going to demand explanations. Maybe even try to discredit you." Maya shook her head slowly. "The only explanation that matters is the one proven by action," she said. "Words are cheap. Shots, precision, composure. That is truth. Everything else is noise." Harris frowned. "But what if they try to erase it? What if they deny it, like before?" She looked at him with a steady gaze. "Then I will do it again. And again. Until truth can't be ignored. Until arrogance is met with consequence. Some people need to be shown, not told." Her words were deliberate, measured, carrying weight far beyond her quiet demeanor. Harris could see the fire in her eyes, a fire that had been dormant but never extinguished. He understood then that this was no ordinary janitor. She was a force, disciplined, lethal, and patient. That evening, after the base quieted down, Maya sat alone in her small office behind the maintenance closet. She reviewed the footage taken by the soldiers earlier. Each shot, each split, each perfectly centered bullet reminded her of who she had been and who she still was. Her mind drifted back again to overseas missions, to the men who had trusted her with their lives, to the friends she had lost, and to the one betrayal that had ended her official career. She had been erased, yes, but she had not been defeated. Not truly. Maya picked up her mop and paused. She set it aside carefully, almost reverently, like handling a relic. Then she stood and walked to the rifle storage area, glancing at the M110 rifles she had trained with long ago. Her fingers brushed the cold metal, and memories of the battlefield surged back. Calculated risk, heart-pounding, wind in the barrel, distance measured with intuition and science. The anger and arrogance of Rourke and others were nothing compared to the memory of missions where mistakes meant death. Those experiences had honed her, shaped her, and made her untouchable in moments like these. The whispers in the hall continued the next morning. Soldiers quietly speculated about who Maya really was. Trainees who had mocked her the previous day avoided her gaze. The general, still unaware of her true identity, walked through the range with forced pride, not realizing that the storm was already gathering beneath the calm surface of a janitor's demeanor. Harris approached her again, offering a quiet nod of respect. "Tomorrow, things are going to change," he said. "People are going to demand answers. They're going to want to know who you are." Maya smiled faintly. "Let them come," she said softly. "The truth has a way of revealing itself, and when it does, it cannot be denied." As she finished her rounds that night, the hallway quiet once again. Maya felt the weight of history and the anticipation of confrontation. The general, the soldiers, the world, they were about to witness what happens when arrogance meets precision, when prejudice meets skill, when the underestimated rises quietly to remind everyone that truth is not measured in words, but in action. And Maya Collins, once erased, was ready to reclaim her place, not with fanfare, but with deadly, undeniable excellence. The morning sun had barely broken through the horizon when the base stirred to life. Soldiers in crisp uniforms ran drills on the open yards, rifles clutched tightly, eyes narrowed in focus. The smell of gun oil mingled with sweat, a familiar combination that always brought adrenaline with it. Yet beneath the routine, a tension threaded through the ranks, subtle but undeniable. Everyone knew General Rourke was present, and his reputation for cruelty and unrelenting perfection preceded him like a shadow. Maya Collins moved through the hallways as usual, mop in hand. Her presence went largely unnoticed, as always. To the untrained eye, she was just another staff member, quietly doing her job, her quiet determination masked beneath the simplicity of janitorial duties. But those who had witnessed her work at the range knew differently. A few trainees glanced at her with curiosity, whispering to each other, yet they quickly fell silent, wary of the consequences of speaking too loudly. The general's arrival was heralded by the crisp clack of polished boots on tile. His figure entered the range building with an unmistakable authority, a storm cloud of presence that silenced everyone in the room. Officers and trainees straightened instantly, faces sharp with anxiety. Some tried to mask it with forced smiles, while others bowed their heads in silent obedience. "Gentlemen," Rourke's voice boomed, sharp and commanding, "today we will separate those who talk from those who act. We will see who can truly shoot clean." His eyes scanned the room, lingering just long enough on each soldier to instill a mix of pride and fear. And before anyone dares ask, women are not included in this demonstration. Precision, discipline, and composure, these are not traits granted to them by birth. A few officers chuckled, carefully hiding nervous glances. The words were cutting, deliberate, intended to intimidate and assert dominance. Soldiers shifted uncomfortably. But it wasn't Rourke's words that held the room's attention, no. It was Maya. Her eyes, calm and unreadable, followed his movements, absorbing every syllable without reaction. One of the younger trainees, perhaps emboldened by naivety or foolish courage, whispered to his comrade, "Shouldn't the janitor stay out of this?" The comment was meant to be private, yet it carried through the silence like a pebble tossed into a still pond. Maya's lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly, and she continued her work without comment. She had learned long ago that arrogance was best met not with words, but with action. Rourke continued his speech, pacing slowly in front of the trainees. "You have been trained, yes. You have been drilled. But there is a difference between competence and mastery. I have seen men fall under pressure. I have seen false confidence fail spectacularly. Real precision requires control, experience, and fearlessness. And again, for emphasis, Women have never demonstrated these qualities under real conditions. This is not opinion. It is fact. Maya's hands tightened slightly on the mop handle. Her jaw stiffened. Years of discipline, years of training in extreme environments flashed through her mind. She had been underestimated before, countless times, across continents and in situations that would make most men falter. And yet, here was another man, centuries of arrogance wrapped in medals, dismissing her existence with a single sweeping statement. A commotion at the rifle rack caught her attention. Soldiers were checking their weapons, whispering nervously, their hands betraying the tension of expectation. Maya glanced at the rifles, familiar companions, now symbols of the challenge before her. The memory of holding an M110 sniper rifle in foreign terrain surged to the surface, a heartbeat of longing, precision, and memory of every mission where a single mistake could have ended lives. Rourke noticed her glance. His eyes narrowed, focusing on her as though seeing for the first time. He sneered. "What's this?" The janitor looking interested. "You've done enough cleaning today, haven't you? Leave the rifles to men who understand them." A few officers chuckled nervously, and some trainees exchanged uneasy looks. Rourke's words were not only derisive, they were intentional, a test not just of skill but of patience. He assumed that by provoking her, he would elicit embarrassment or hesitation. He assumed he could intimidate her because of her gender. Maya didn't flinch. Instead, she took a small step forward, her movement measured, deliberate. She wasn't reacting. She was calculating. Each second that passed was another piece of preparation, another quiet affirmation of capability. The laughter around her faded into the background. Her focus sharpened. One of the younger trainees, emboldened by Rourke's mockery, said loudly, "Hey, maybe she should try it, sir. Let's see if women really can't hit anything." The general laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Exactly. Only men can shoot that clean. Anyone who doubts me can test the truth." He pointed at Maya, smirk spreading across his face. "Yes, you there. The janitor. Pick up the rifle if you dare." The room froze. Some soldiers held their breath. Officers glanced nervously at each other. Whispers erupted. Excitement, disbelief, and fear mixing into a low hum. Maya's response was silent. She set down the mop carefully, straightening her back as though shrugging off centuries of bias in one motion. Her hands reached for the M110, fingers brushing against the cold steel. The weight of the rifle was familiar, comforting, a language she had long mastered. The murmurs in the room faded into a tense silence as she assumed her stance. Rourke's smirk faltered slightly. He hadn't expected compliance, much less confidence. His eyes darted around, searching for support, but found only hesitation. For the first time that morning, the arrogance that had filled him felt uncertain, even fragile. Maya lay flat on the mat, aligning the rifle with precision. Her breathing slowed, each inhale and exhale a rhythmic calculation. She accounted for distance, wind, humidity, and the natural sway of the weapon. Every nerve, every muscle memory from years past guided her, silent and exact. The general watched, rigid, his pride and disbelief clashing violently. The soldiers could feel the tension radiating from him, like a storm about to break. Then she fired. The bullet tore through the air, slicing toward the target 300 meters away. It struck dead center. Absolute perfection. The room went silent. Whispers of disbelief grew into audible gasps. Soldiers stepped back, unsure whether to applaud or flee. Officers exchanged hurried glances. Rourke's face turned pale, the smirk wiped clean, replaced by a tension he couldn't disguise. Maya didn't move. She reloaded with steady hands, her calm unwavering. She fired again, The second shot split the first bullet clean in half. Gasps echoed like thunder through the hall. Rourke's mouth opened, closed, and remained agape. Every officer and trainee realized they had just witnessed an impossible feat. Maya set the rifle down carefully. Her hands moved gracefully, as if handling a fragile relic. She turned her eyes toward the general, voice quiet, yet cutting. "Precision doesn't require permission," she said softly. The words landed heavier than any bullet. They were truth incarnate, undeniable and unassailable. Silence hung over the room like a shroud. Soldiers stared, mouths open. Officers froze. And Rourke, the man who had believed arrogance could shield him, stared in disbelief. His legacy, his authority, even his understanding of skill, was shattered in moments by the quiet, lethal presence of a janitor who had once been one of the most feared and respected SEALs in history. Maya returned to her mop, completing her cleaning as if nothing had happened. The lesson had been delivered. No one could deny it. The arrogance had been met with precision, the prejudice answered in action, and the room had been forever changed. Outside, the sun climbed higher over the base, casting long shadows over polished floors and weapon racks. It illuminated the janitor, who had just demonstrated that true skill transcends gender, expectation, and authority. And in that light, the world, or at least this small corner of it, began to see her not as a janitor, but as a legend returned. The echoes of the sniper rifle still reverberated through the range long after the second bullet split the first perfectly in half. Silence had enveloped the hall, thick and heavy, as if even the air had paused to absorb the impossible. Soldiers who had laughed, whispered, and mocked now stared in disbelief. Officers and trainees alike had frozen mid-step, their expressions a mixture of awe, fear, and incomprehension. General Rourke stood rooted to the spot, his smirk evaporated, replaced by a hard, rigid disbelief. His eyes flicked between Maya Collins and the target. The numbers, the precision, the symmetry, they did not match anything he had ever witnessed. Impossible, he thought. It cannot be. Maya, however, remained calm. She carefully laid the M110 back on the rack, her hands precise and deliberate. Her stance, upright and controlled, conveyed nothing but quiet assurance. The room seemed to exhale collectively, a stunned hush, broken only by the faint scratching of her mop as she returned to her cleaning. The trainees whispered nervously among themselves. "Did you see that?" One murmured. "She split the bullet." I thought that was impossible," another admitted. "Even our best instructors can't do that consistently." The officers glanced at each other, uncertain how to react. Some masked their awe with forced professionalism. Others simply stared. The general's voice, when it came, was low, tight, and strained. This isn't real," he muttered, though no one dared challenge him. Harris, the young lieutenant who had discovered Maya's secret the night before, finally spoke. "It's real, sir. I've seen the files. Her record. She isn't just a janitor. She's a decorated SEAL. She's the one they erased." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "Erased? That doesn't change this. Anyone can get lucky." Harris shook his head. 2 shots. Dead center. And split. That's not luck. By midday, news of the incident began to spread like wildfire through the base. Word of mouth carried faster than any official announcement could. Trainees who had witnessed the shots whispered in dormitories, cafeteria lines, and training halls. Administrators and clerks spread the story in hushed tones, their curiosity and awe mingling with disbelief. Maya continued her work quietly, sweeping floors, polishing brass, emptying trash bins. To her, this was just part of the day. But outside her small, orderly world, the ripples of her actions were spreading. Soldiers who had doubted her abilities now looked at her with respect. Some were cautious, unsure how to approach her without offense. Others simply stared. One young recruit, the same who had mocked her days before, dared to whisper, She actually did it. There's no way. She did, another replied, awed. And the general? He didn't even know how to react. The general, meanwhile, retreated to his office. His face, normally a mask of authority and certainty, now betrayed unease and anger. He had been humiliated by someone he had considered beneath his notice, a janitor, a woman erased from the records, someone he had mocked openly. The thought gnawed at him. Authority, he realized, was fragile when confronted by undeniable truth. By evening, footage of the shots, captured by trainees' phones, had circulated through the base's internal network. Soldiers shared it quietly at first, then more openly, until administrators and staff could no longer ignore it. The precision, the composure, the impossible split shot, every frame reinforced what had happened. Rumors grew into discussions into debates. Who is she really? Why was she hidden? How could someone erase a legend? The whispers were relentless. Even the instructors, who prided themselves on control and discipline, had to acknowledge the truth. Maya's presence in the hallways remained calm, almost mundane, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. But she could feel the change, the subtle shift in perception among the soldiers, the officers, even the general's aides. Respect had replaced doubt, curiosity had replaced ridicule, and fear had replaced arrogance. Late that night, in the empty cafeteria, Harris approached her once more. "They're talking about you," he said softly. "The entire base. Even the higher-ups. Your name. It's being whispered everywhere. People want to know how a janitor can shoot like that. They're going to demand proof." Maya looked up from her mop, expression unreadable. "Proof," she said slowly, "is in the action, not the story. They'll see the results again if necessary. I've already reminded them once." Harris hesitated. "Do you plan to do it again? To show them?" She set down her cleaning supplies and straightened. "I will show them what must be seen. Not for glory, not for revenge, but to remind them that truth cannot be hidden. And arrogance cannot survive when confronted by skill." Her words carried the weight of a veteran who had survived the impossible. A woman who had been erased, but not defeated. Harris nodded, understanding for the first time that this was more than a demonstration of skill. It was a quiet reclamation of honor, a reminder that history cannot erase excellence. The following morning, the base was abuzz. Soldiers and officers alike were still processing what had happened. Trainees lined up for drills, but many had their eyes lingering on Maya, watching her move with the calm confidence of someone entirely in control of the situation. Some tried to approach her, but hesitated, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. Rourke, meanwhile, was consumed by the memory of the range. His mind replayed the shots endlessly, the split bullet, the calm precision, the quiet defiance. For a man accustomed to control and unquestioned authority, it was unbearable. He could not reconcile his perception of superiority with the undeniable skill he had just witnessed. He summoned his aides. "Find out who she is," he commanded, voice low but urgent. "Get her record. I want answers. If this is a trick, I will expose it. If not—" He trailed off, the unspoken fear of being wrong heavy in the room. By noon, the investigation was underway. Administrative officers were combing through files, searching for her background, her credentials, anything that could explain the impossible. And while they searched, whispers continued among the soldiers. Some admired her. Some feared her. Others simply marveled in disbelief. Maya herself remained unbothered. She continued her rounds, quietly cleaning the floors, polishing brass, and checking equipment. To the untrained eye, she was just another janitor performing her duties. To those who had seen the shots, however, she was a living legend, quietly reshaping the perception of what was possible. Harris approached her again, leaning slightly against the wall. "They're trying to erase you again, in reports and memos. But the footage, it can't be denied. People are rallying behind you." Maya smiled faintly. "Let them watch," she said softly. "The truth will speak louder than anything they write in a report." Her calmness, her quiet assurance, was as formidable as her shooting. She had learned long ago that presence and action were the ultimate proofs. Words were transient. Results were permanent. By nightfall, the base had settled into an uneasy calm. Soldiers whispered in their quarters, officers debated in quiet offices, and Rourke sat alone in his private quarters, staring at the ceiling. He was consumed by a rare emotion, fear. Not of danger, but of irrelevance. For the first time in decades, he was unsure of himself. He had been mocked, outclassed, and humiliated, not by an enemy, not by a peer, but by someone he had deemed insignificant. Maya, meanwhile, returned to her office behind the maintenance closet. She reviewed the footage once more. Each frame, each bullet, each perfect split reinforced a simple truth. Skill could not be erased, and courage could not be silenced. She had reminded the world, in the most precise, undeniable way, that she had been wronged, but never broken. Outside, the stars shimmered above the base, silent witnesses to the quiet reclamation of a legend. And somewhere deep inside, Maya felt the thrill that comes from being acknowledged, even indirectly, for what she truly was. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, investigations, perhaps humiliation for those who had doubted her. But tonight, she was at peace. She had proven what needed proving. She had fired 2 bullets, and the world had heard their truth. The quiet janitor, once erased, was now impossible to ignore. The morning air was unusually tense over the base. Soldiers marched with a heightened awareness. Officers spoke in hushed, urgent tones, and whispers traveled faster than orders could be given. Word of Maya Collins' unparalleled precision had leaked beyond the training halls, traveling from dormitories to administrative offices, and now into the hands of those who controlled internal military communication networks. Screens flickered across the base with video footage, captured by trainees' discreet phones. Soldiers huddled around, replaying the impossible shots again and again. Each split bullet, each perfect strike at 300 meters, reaffirmed a truth that could no longer be ignored. The janitor, the forgotten, erased, underestimated woman, had just publicly proven her skill beyond doubt. Lieutenant Harris, who had been observing the aftermath quietly from the sidelines, noticed the effect it was having. Soldiers who had mocked her days before now exchanged awed glances. Some whispered apologies. Others simply stared, uncertain whether to approach or stand back. Commanding officers convened in hurried meetings, trying to assess the potential consequences. General Rourke, however, was struggling privately. He had spent decades cultivating authority, respect, and fear, only to have it undermined in a single impossible moment. Sitting in his office, he replayed the footage, watching the 2 shots again. He examined the rifle, the stance, the calm precision, every detail that demonstrated what he had refused to believe possible. "This can't be real," he muttered to himself, slamming a fist against his desk. Papers rattled. His aides hovered in nervous silence. This, she? He shook his head. Impossible. Completely impossible. One aide, braver than the rest, dared speak. "Sir, the evidence is undeniable. We verified her credentials. She was a SEAL, decorated, covert operations. The records exist, just sealed." Rourke leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. "Erased," Why was she erased? And why is she here, mocking us? The aide hesitated. It appears her discharge was politically motivated, sir. And as for today, she demonstrated skill far beyond anything expected. The base is reacting. Soldiers are impressed. Loyal officers are confused, and the morale dynamic has shifted. There's no denying it. Rourke's face flushed with fury and humiliation. He had always believed authority could bend reality. Today, reality had bent him. Meanwhile, Maya moved through the base as if nothing had changed. To the untrained eye, she was just another janitor, completing her daily rounds. Mop in hand, she cleaned, organized, and ensured the base remained functional. But she was acutely aware of the undercurrent of attention, the quiet awe, the nervous glances, the whispered conversations following her through corridors. Even the soldiers who had once openly mocked her were now careful to avoid offense. Some stopped to offer reluctant nods of respect. Others whispered among themselves, trying to understand how someone so casually dressed, so unassuming, could wield such skill. Maya paid them no mind. Her focus remained absolute, her calm impenetrable. She had learned long ago that skill needed no witness. Action was its own testimony. By midday, the story had reached higher levels. Internal military communications buzzed with talk of the janitor sniper incident, a title both absurd and accurate. Officers debated whether the situation required formal investigation, media containment, or public acknowledgement. The footage, despite attempts to control it, was already circulating internally. Colonels and commanding officers convened in tense sessions. "We can't ignore this," one said. Per record, the demonstration, the morale shift, the base is reacting. Soldiers are choosing whom to respect, and right now, that respect is not with General Rourke. Another officer added, "We need a response, a controlled recognition. Otherwise, the rumors and whispers will spiral. The general's authority is being undermined in real time." Rourke, for the first time in decades, realized that control was slipping from his grasp. The arrogance that had once protected him now worked against him. He had underestimated her. He had mocked her. And now the impossible truth of her skill was eroding the foundation of his command. Maya, aware of the ripple effect she had set in motion, remained composed. She understood the power of perception, the weight of unacknowledged excellence, and the inevitability of confrontation. The base would demand explanations, and Rourke would likely attempt to discredit her or assert control through bureaucratic channels. But Maya had long learned that truth, demonstrated in action, could not be silenced. She was no longer concerned with recognition or revenge. Her goal was simple: to assert undeniable skill in a world too eager to dismiss her because of gender and circumstance. That afternoon, Harris approached her again. "The base. It's talking nonstop. Even instructors who used to dismiss you are acknowledging your skill. But the general, he's furious. He's calling meetings, demanding answers. People are worried about the political fallout. What will you do?" Maya considered him for a moment. "I will continue to do what I do best," she said. "If they want answers, I will give them. But not on their timeline, and not in their terms. They will see what they need to see, and nothing more." Harris nodded, understanding the quiet power in her words. She was not acting out of ego. She was acting out of principle, a reminder that skill and truth could not be erased. By evening, the base had settled into an uneasy calm. Soldiers whispered in their quarters, officers debated in their offices, and General Rourke sat alone, replaying the footage over and over. The humiliation had not faded. His ego, carefully cultivated over decades, was under siege by someone he had underestimated. Rourke summoned his aides again. "I want her record, everything. Who authorized her discharge? How did she come back? One aide replied cautiously, "Sir, it appears her discharge was politically motivated. She was not dishonorably discharged. Her record was sealed for security reasons. And she has returned." Quietly, as staff. Rourke slammed his fist against the desk. Quietly? Quietly she undermines me, exposes my arrogance, and proves every word I said wrong. The aide said nothing. No words could mitigate the storm in the general's mind. Meanwhile, Maya retired to her small office behind the maintenance closet. She reviewed the footage one more time, each frame reminding her of the precision, control, and calm she had demonstrated. Every soldier, every officer, every skeptical glance she had endured for years paled in comparison to the undeniable proof she now held in her hands. She allowed herself a small, fleeting smile. Not for glory, not for revenge, but for truth, the truth that she had once been denied, now made manifest in action. Outside, the stars shimmered over the base, indifferent to the human drama unfolding beneath. But within the walls, history had shifted subtly. A janitor had reminded a general and an entire base of the power of skill, discipline, and courage. Tomorrow would bring scrutiny, confrontation, and perhaps reckoning. But tonight, Maya Collins, once erased, had reclaimed her place. Not with words, not with orders, but with unassailable action. And in the quiet, her legend began to ripple through the base, impossible to ignore. The base was tense the next morning, electric with anticipation. Soldiers whispered in the corridors. Officers lingered in meetings, and even the trainees who had been unimpressed days earlier walked with cautious awe. Every eye seemed to follow Maya Collins as she moved silently through her rounds. Mop in hand, she looked like she had always been nothing more than a janitor. But every person who had witnessed the split-shot demonstration knew differently. They now understood that beneath her quiet exterior was a force that could not be dismissed, questioned, or ignored. General Rourke, however, saw only a threat to his authority. The previous day's demonstration had rattled him in a way that no battlefield encounter ever had. Years of ingrained confidence, of unquestioned hierarchy, had been challenged by a single act of precision, by a woman he had dismissed as insignificant. The idea gnawed at him. He had been proven wrong, publicly humiliated, and his ego could not endure the weight of that realization. By mid-morning, he called an immediate assembly of senior officers. "I want answers," he barked, his tone sharper than usual. "Who authorized her return to this base? What are her qualifications? And how did she perform that demonstration?" The aides and officers exchanged nervous glances. The truth was unavoidable, undeniable, and politically delicate. "Sir," one lieutenant began cautiously, "her record shows she was a decorated SEAL, covert missions overseas. She was discharged, sealed for security reasons, but her skill and experience are beyond question." The demonstration was beyond question? Rourke snapped, slamming a fist against the table. It was impossible. A janitor, splitting bullets like a legend? I will not have my authority undermined by someone who should not even be here. The room went silent. Everyone knew he was furious, but few had ever seen him this destabilized. His eyes, usually sharp and commanding, darted nervously. Pride and disbelief warred visibly across his face. Meanwhile, word of the confrontation had begun to spread. Soldiers whispered in the halls. Curious eyes followed Maya as she went about her rounds. Some wanted to apologize for past doubts. Others simply wanted to witness her calm demeanor, the quiet confidence that had unseated the general's arrogance. Maya, however, remained composed. Every step, every gesture, conveyed control. She understood the power of presence, and she did not need to engage with Rourke's fury directly. His emotions were his own weakness, and she had no desire to feed them. Lieutenant Harris, who had quietly supported Maya throughout the ordeal, approached her with a cautious nod. "They're calling a tribunal," he said. "The general insists on formal proceedings. People are worried about fallout. He wants to publicly challenge you, assert control, and, I don't know, humiliate you?" Maya considered him silently. "Then let it come," she said softly. "I've already demonstrated what needs to be seen. The tribunal will be a formality, not a test. The truth doesn't need witnesses." Harris nodded, sensing the unwavering confidence in her tone. "Be careful," he said. "Rourke won't stop. He's desperate." Maya smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. "Desperation is predictable. I've dealt with worse." By midday, the tribunal convened in the main hall. Officers, soldiers, and a select audience of aides filled the room. Cameras and recording devices were set up, everything documented for transparency. General Rourke stood at the front, rigid with controlled fury. He had been preparing a speech that would assert his authority, question her qualifications, and perhaps attempt to rewrite the narrative of yesterday's events. Maya entered quietly, unassuming in her work uniform, mop set aside. She moved with calm precision, taking her seat where the panel had directed. Every step was deliberate, every motion measured. She exuded a quiet confidence that drew glances from everyone in the room. Whispers followed her as she passed. "That's the janitor." "No, the seal. The one from yesterday." Rourke's eyes narrowed, his hand tightening around the edge of the podium. He could feel the eyes of the base upon him, the soldiers, officers, and trainees all waiting. He had to assert control, to maintain the image of authority he had cultivated for decades. "Lieutenant Commander Collins," he began, voice sharp, "you have challenged the authority of this base. You have performed acts yesterday that, while impressive, call into question your position here, your role, and your legitimacy. Explain yourself." Maya's gaze was steady. "I am here to do my duty, as I always have. My position in the past was erased by circumstances outside of my control. My demonstration yesterday was not for recognition, nor for challenge. It was to show that skill, precision, and discipline are not determined by title, gender, or perception." Rourke's jaw tightened. "Skill is meaningless if it undermines command. I am in charge here. You are dismissed, discharged, and yet you return, unannounced, to demonstrate superiority over those under my command. How do you justify this?" Maya's voice remained calm, measured, almost teacher-like. "Command is not established by arrogance. It is proven by competence, fairness, and acknowledgement of truth. Yesterday, the demonstration was truth made visible. The perception you hold does not define reality." A hush fell over the room. Soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. The general's aides shifted uncomfortably. No one had ever spoken to Rourke in this manner. No one had ever challenged him so directly, so calmly, and so irreversibly. Rourke's face flushed, a mixture of rage and disbelief. He pointed toward the recorded footage. "This," he said, voice rising, "is staged. No one can perform with such precision without preparation unknown to this base. You have deceived us." Harris, standing quietly near Maya, spoke up. "Sir, the footage is verified. The shots were real. She fired under observation, and her skill has been documented by multiple witnesses. There is no deception." Rourke's hands trembled slightly. "Multiple witnesses. This cannot be. She is a janitor. She is. She should not exist in this capacity." Maya finally spoke again, her voice cutting through the tension like a well-aimed bullet. "I exist because skill cannot be erased, authority cannot rewrite history, and truth will always find a way to be seen. You may be uncomfortable with this, General, but discomfort does not negate fact. A ripple of murmurs ran through the audience. Soldiers shifted, officers exchanged glances, and Rourke's composure cracked further. He had spent decades commanding fear, respect, and unquestioned obedience. Today, all three had been subtly stripped away. The tribunal continued, but it was clear from the outset who held the moral high ground. Witnesses, soldiers who had trained with Maya, officers who had seen her in action, spoke quietly yet confidently of her record, her skill, and her discipline. Each testimony reinforced the undeniable truth of her capability. Rourke tried to regain control, his voice sharp, commanding, insistent. "This does not change my authority. I am still the general. I still lead this base." Harris leaned toward him quietly, voice calm but firm. "Sir, leadership is earned through respect and competence, not fear or arrogance." Yesterday, that lesson was delivered clearly. The general's eyes narrowed, fury and humiliation pouring visibly across his face. He had underestimated her, mocked her, and now, before his peers, the truth had unmasked him completely. Maya remained seated, calm, composed, unflinching. The janitor had become a legend once more, reclaiming honor and demanding acknowledgement without aggression, without spectacle. Only through undeniable skill and quiet dignity. By the end of the tribunal, it was clear to everyone in the room. Rourke's authority, though intact in title, had been fundamentally undermined by the incontrovertible proof of Maya Collins' excellence. The base, and perhaps the military itself, had witnessed something extraordinary, a reminder that competence cannot be erased, arrogance cannot withstand truth, and legacy is built on results, not ego. The morning sun filtered through the base's tall windows, casting long golden beams across polished floors and orderly corridors. Soldiers moved with a sense of anticipation, whispers of the previous day's events threading through the ranks. The janitor's presence had become more than ordinary. It was now emblematic, a quiet force reshaping perception with every step she took. Maya Collins, once erased from history, had reclaimed her place, not with fanfare, but through undeniable action. The tribunal had concluded late the previous evening. General Rourke, stripped of his smug certainty, had retreated to private offices to nurse bruised pride and reassess the hierarchy he had taken for granted. Officers and soldiers alike had emerged from the hearings with an altered understanding. Competence, skill, and courage could not be silenced, even by bureaucracy or prejudice. And at the center of that revelation was Maya, a quiet janitor with the heart and training of a Navy SEAL. The day began with subtle changes. Officers approached Maya with hesitant respect, nods and murmured acknowledgments, following her through the halls. Trainees who had once whispered derision now sought even the smallest chance to observe her, to learn from her composure, her discipline, the quiet power she radiated. Even General Rourke's most loyal aides could not conceal a sense of awe mingled with fear when they crossed her path. Lieutenant Harris, walking alongside her during one of her rounds, remarked quietly, "The base has changed overnight. Soldiers are talking, officers are adjusting, and even the media channels are buzzing internally. You've reminded everyone what excellence looks like." Maya nodded, expression calm, but eyes sharp. Excellence cannot be hidden. It can be ignored temporarily, but it will always manifest when needed. That is all I have done, allowed truth to speak for itself. Harris smiled faintly, understanding that for Maya, the demonstration, the tribunal, and the whispers were secondary. The act itself, skill displayed, respect earned, and arrogance corrected, was the only acknowledgement necessary. By mid-morning, the ripple effect of her actions had reached outside the base. Internal communications, previously controlled and cautious, now highlighted the extraordinary events. Soldiers shared verified footage of the split-bullet demonstration, while officers prepared reports detailing her accomplishments. both past and present. The name Maya Collins was spoken with a newfound reverence. Where once there had been doubt and dismissal, now there was recognition, admiration, and a subtle, reluctant awe. Even General Rourke could no longer maintain the facade of dominance. His office, once a shrine to authority and pride, had become a place of introspection and unease. He replayed the footage of Maya's shots repeatedly, searching for a flaw he could exploit, a detail he could question. None appeared. The more he scrutinized, the clearer the truth became. He had been outclassed, outmaneuvered, and publicly corrected. The day's activities included routine drills, yet the atmosphere was different. Soldiers approached their training with a quiet, renewed determination, inspired by the reminder that excellence was not limited by rank, title, or gender. Trainees who had once underestimated Maya now watched her movements closely, learning from her calm composure, the precision of her actions, and the discipline that radiated from her every gesture. Maya, however, moved through the day with the same quiet purpose she always had. Mop in hand, she cleaned floors, polished brass, and organized supplies, her presence ordinary in form, but extraordinary in perception. She did not seek acknowledgement. She did not seek applause. She merely allowed her actions to speak for her, and those actions had already reshaped the culture of the base. Late in the afternoon, a formal recognition ceremony was quietly convened. Officers, soldiers, and aides gathered in the main hall. The event was understated, far removed from the spectacle Maya could have commanded, yet the symbolism was clear. Internal reports were read aloud, verifying her past missions, her decorated SEAL record, and the incredible demonstration at the range. Her achievements, once hidden, were now recorded, acknowledged, and undeniable. Rourke sat stiffly in the front row, his face pale and rigid. The humiliation of yesterday's events lingered like a shadow over his posture. He had attempted to assert authority, to frame the narrative, but the documentation, the witnesses, and the undeniable skill on display rendered his efforts futile. Maya had turned the tables not through aggression, but through action, discipline, and unwavering truth. When Maya stepped forward to accept a formal acknowledgement of her contributions, she did so with measured grace. Her voice was calm, deliberate, carrying the weight of experience and quiet authority. "I have done what I was trained to do, what I have always done. Recognition is unnecessary. Skill and discipline are their own reward, and the truth, once proven, stands on its own." The room was silent, captivated not by spectacle, but by the quiet dignity and command she exuded. Officers nodded, soldiers whispered, and even Rourke felt the undeniable shift. He had been corrected, publicly and irreversibly, not by words, but by competence. In the following days, the base's culture began to shift in subtle but permanent ways. Officers who had once relied solely on rank and intimidation now sought to balance authority with fairness, acknowledging skill wherever it appeared. Soldiers approached training with renewed respect for capability, understanding that prejudice and arrogance could be challenged and corrected. And throughout it all, Maya remained a quiet presence, teaching without words, leading by example, her every action a lesson in discipline, precision, and integrity. Harris, observing the changes, remarked, "It's like the base has been transformed overnight. People are seeing skill for what it is, not who wields it." "That's remarkable." Maya smiled faintly. "Change does not come from spectacle. It comes from proof, and proof cannot be ignored." Weeks passed, yet the impact of Maya's actions continued to resonate. Soldiers and officers who had doubted, mocked, or ignored her now spoke her name with respect. Internal reports documented her demonstration at the range, her past missions, and the discipline that had allowed her to thrive in the face of erasure. The term Janitor became a badge of honor rather than derision, a symbol of quiet skill that transcended appearances and expectations. General Rourke, meanwhile, maintained his title but adjusted his approach. The lessons of humility, oversight, and respect had been harshly impressed upon him. He no longer mocked or underestimated those beneath him. He observed, assessed, and learned. While pride still burned within him, it was tempered by the undeniable truth of Maya Collins' legacy. By nightfall, the base had settled into a new rhythm. Soldiers trained with focus, officers planned with renewed perspective, and Maya moved quietly through the halls, unseen yet profoundly felt. Her actions had created a lasting impact, reshaping perceptions, challenging biases, and demonstrating that excellence cannot be erased, authority cannot rewrite history, and truth is revealed not through words, but through unassailable skill. In the quiet of her small office behind a maintenance closet, Maya reflected on the events of the past week. She had proven what needed proving, reclaimed her honor, and reshaped the culture around her. Yet she remained modest, calm, and purposeful. Recognition was fleeting. Skill was permanent. She had learned this long ago, and now so had everyone else. The stars shimmered above the base that night, silent witnesses to the quiet reclamation of a legend. Maya Collins, once erased, had reclaimed her place not through spectacle, not through ego, but through action, precise, disciplined, and undeniable. She had reminded a general, a base, and a world that excellence cannot be hidden. Arrogance cannot endure when confronted with truth, and legacy is earned in action, not title. Her name would now endure, spoken with respect and awe, and in every corridor, every firing range, and every hall of the base, her presence, calm, decisive, and unstoppable, would serve as a permanent reminder. True skill transcends prejudice, defies expectation, and leaves a mark that cannot be erased. The janitor who had ended a general's pride had become a legend, and her legacy would inspire soldiers, officers, and civilians for generations to come. The story concludes with Maya's triumph through action, dignity, and skill, cementing her legacy as a figure of quiet yet undeniable excellence.